Hey everyone, this is Dhru from Berta 360. I'm the founder and CEO of Berta 360, and today we have Mark from Swivel. This is just a quick, one-on-one conversation about, what we do, what helped us, start our companies, our products, and the challenges we had. It's really just unstructured, friend to friend talk, and we figured that some of our audience would enjoy the conversation, and if you're in the process of starting a company, or if you have a early stage startup, I feel like this can help a lot of people. So hey, thanks Mark for being here. Why don't you go and introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Yeah, Drew, I appreciate it. So, hi everybody. My name is Mark Berta. I'm the president and founder of Swivel trolling motor mounts, and we basically kind of invented the swiveling trolling motor mount for boats, and it's really just taken off in the last 3.5 years that we started the company. So, we've been very excited about the growth of the company and all the new products that we're coming out with. So, I appreciate you having me, Drew.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Mark started Sisu probably a year before Bodat 360 started.
Yeah, it
Um,
was early 2023 is when we started doing everything with the concepts and all that.
Right, because we're about 2.5, 2 years old at this point. It took me a while to do all the R&D, and you know how that goes. You start,
Yeah,
and then you got to bring the product to the market. So I don't always count that time period because that was just me in my garage tinkering.
same
But
way.
anyway, tell us how Cecil started. Tell us everything, your background, where what was your previous experience, where you worked at, and what made you, start the company. Just the whole founder story.
Yeah, for sure. So, my background is I'm born and raised down here in the Florida Keys. So I've been around boating my entire life. I graduated from Coral Shores High School down here in the Keys. We were lucky at our high school. We actually have a 4-year outboard technician classes that are in our high school that's sponsored by Mercury. So I was able to take 4 years of outboard technician classes at my high school. I also took automotive as well. But as soon as I graduated high school, I went straight to MMI. I graduated from MMI, so I have my degree in marine mechanics, and I'm also Yamaha certified, Mercury certified, 7 Marine certified, which doesn't really matter anymore because it's not really a company anymore. But I was one of the only outboard certified 7 Marine techs for a while there, and I worked at Plantation Boat Mart with Hydrosport for about 6 years or so.
Mhm.
So that was the dealership down here in the Keys, and that was also the people that owned Hydrosport. So I worked for basically HCB, and then after that I went to Sea Hunter Boats, and I was the GM at Sea Hunter Boats for about 12 years.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah. So I've had a pretty good career. I've been really lucky at the opportunities that I've gotten, and I just turned 36 this year, so I've done all this in my 20s. I was running an entire boat company with all the guys at Sea Hunter in my 20s, so that was really cool, and I learned a lot. And yeah, I think that's just kind of how this company started. Is I kind of hit the market at the perfect timing. That was right when all these large trolling motors were coming out. Rodan had just come out with the big 108-inch trolling
Mhm.
motor, and it was funny. Like when that 108 came out, like you should have seen like the comments online. Like everyone's like, "Who the hell wants that trolling motor on their boat? There's no reason a trolling motor should be on a 30-foot plus boat. You guys are nuts." And it's so funny to see how it happens like that, because it kind of happened at Sea Hunter too, right? Like I remember when I started Sea Hunter, we were doing quad engine boats, and I remember being at the Miami Boat Show, and this was probably in like 2011 or 2010, and
Mhm.
they had a quad engine boat there, and everyone that walked up to that boat was like, "You guys are nuts! There's no way. No one wants 4 engines. 4 outboards is stupid." So it's so funny how you see like the markets change on like the customer perception of something until they actually get on something and realize how good it works, you know, and then they kind of change their
Right.
mindset behind it.
It's like any technology, right? So my background is tech. That's I worked past 10 years in tech. So it's always you start something, and everybody will reject it because
Mhm.
change is hard. And
Yeah.
then over time, if you're successful at onboarding people and the change is, you know, not as difficult, to make that change, I should say, then everybody gets on board. And then once a small group of people start doing it, then larger groups of people see that and they know it works, and everybody starts, turning over. But you mentioned you had a program in your high school to work on outboards, dude. That is like, I never heard such thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's a such thing anywhere else. I know, like at college level, they have courses, but like to work on engines in high school, I mean,
Yeah.
that
So
is that is
yeah,
awesome, dude.
yeah. So our outboard, so like we had marine tech, we had wood shop, and then we had automotive. So in our automotive class, we had a full lift inside of our classroom. Like we had cars that would come in there, and on the outboard side, it was sponsored by Mercury. So we had Verados in there. This is back. I mean, I graduated in 2008. So, this was right when like the Verado was first coming out back in like 2006,
How
2007.
much were they at the time? Let's say, I don't know, like if you had to just remember the price at that point.
Yeah, so like a Verado back then I think was like around $30,000, which
Right.
still a lot of
Imagine,
money
imagine as a
today.
high school student who can work on a $30,000
Yeah,
outboard
it
in
was
high
crazy.
school. Man,
So like,
that's a dream come true. Like,
yeah, we had a bunch of high school kids tearing down a brand new, $30,000 Verado. But obviously, like there was only one in the classroom, and then there was a lot of smaller engines that were in the classroom as well. But it
mhm.
was cool because it kind of I've always been very technical. I've always built motors. I built my own truck motor for my little uh,
Mhm.
race truck that I have. But what was great about that program and was also great about MMI is they just start from scratch. Like they teach you the basics, how a four stroke works, how a two stroke works. So it literally started from ground zero, which kind of sucked for me because I already knew a lot of it already just because of my background and what I just what makes my gears turn. So
Mhm.
it was pretty boring the first 2 years of the classroom, for me, but the last 2 years was
Right.
pretty
So
advanced
you,
as
right.
everything.
Sorry to interrupt, but you started at there, and then you worked at managing basically a large company who sold books. What was the process from there? Like when the idea came of Swivel, like I want to know the story. Like when it said, "Hey, look, wait a minute. What if I did this?" And tell me about the process from the idea to go into market. And I want, if there's folks listening to this and they're thinking about starting a business, uh, I want to show them that anyone can do it. This is not rocket science, and it can be simple. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work, but if you commit to it, it's not impossible. So I mean, I'm 31 to 36. We both started right at early 30s, but you can start these. I have friends who are founders in their 20s doing this, right? So go ahead and tell us that story because I really don't know the story either. So I'm curious to know how that whole thing happened.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think a lot of it was timing, just market timing. I just happened to run a boat company and I started seeing these large trolling motors start coming down the pipeline. And, a select few customers started asking for, these large trolling motors. And, I always found myself, when somebody ordered a trolling motor, I would have to call the customer and be like, hey, unfortunately, the way I have to mount this is it has to be able to clear the rub rail to deploy it. But then when you stow it, wherever your deployed position is, you can't change the angle. So you're either going to cover your anchor locker hatch, you're going to cover your forward seating. And, obviously, like the offset brackets have always been out there on the market. And what that is like, it's a bracket that you bolt on the gunnel and then the trolling motor hangs outside of the rub rail. But the problem
I
of
do,
doing that,
because then you hit the docks and pilings and everything else when you go
correct,
to
yeah. So
but yeah, I know
especially down here
exactly
in
what
the
you're talking
Keys,
about.
yeah, like everyone has a boat lift down here, to put their boat on, and you can't have that thing just sticking, 2 feet off the side of your hull because you can't even get it on the boat lift. So historically, they were always mounted on the bow of the boat, and to keep the trolling motor head from being overboard, they used to always have to, bring it inside the boat, and then now you're, intruding into your forward seating or whatever else. So I always found myself having to kind of tell the customer like, hey, I know you want this, but it's going to cost you something else somewhere else in the boat. So that's kind of how the idea came about. I was like, man, I'm like, I don't know why they don't just have like a kind of a swiveling bracket or something to keep this motor to be
Mm-hmm.
able to adjust it wherever you want. So I did what everyone else probably does. I went home and like started searching and started Googling, and I'll never forget. I Googled swiveling trolling motor mount, and there wasn't one single thing that popped up on Google. And I looked at my wife Samantha, and I'm like, I don't think this thing exists yet. And then she's like, that's impossible. Like everything exists. I'm like, I really don't think like anyone's ever done this before. And so I already knew right off the bat, just trying to do a simple Google search, and like, I scoured, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. I just couldn't find anything on it. And I was like, man, I'm like, before I do anything with this, I always knew that people patented things. I just didn't know what how that goes, and what's entailed in that. So before I did anything, I first reached out to a patent agent. Um, you know, Thankfully I had a lot of people to talk to. I know a lot of people in the industry, so I kind of asked, who would be good to, do patents and all that. So, and for anyone that's looking to patent something, it sounds really scary, but it really isn't. So what normally happens is you'll find your patent agent or whoever you want to use, and they're going to do something called a prior art search. So before drop any kind of massive amounts of money, because don't get me wrong, patents are incredibly expensive. But once you do a prior art search, that kind of tells you what what your trajectory is going to be as far as if you're going to get a patent or if you're not. So when they did a prior art search for what I wanted, there was zero. There never had been a patent for any swiveling trolling motor mount in the history of patents. So my patent agent's like, listen, obviously nothing's 100%, but you have a very, very good chance of getting a patent because it doesn't exist yet. So that's kind of how this whole thing started. So for anyone that's watching this or has an idea, definitely don't be afraid to try to get a patent, or try to start the company up, because it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of long hard hours for the first couple of years, but it's definitely doable for sure.
Right. So, I mean, I was told a little bit differently when I started mine, because you also don't want to do like where like you start a product and you're investing all your time and money into patterns, whether
Hmm.
it's a design pattern or utility pattern or whatever, even trademark. I was told, and this is I think coming from me from the IT background, is get the product going. You have your MVP, right? Minimal viable product that you prototype you can make, and then start selling or get feedback. If there is enough interest and if people are actually buying it, then you can look into the patterns. And because a lot of times I meet so many friends, and the first few months they're focused on that part, and I was like, well, there's no proof that this will work or this will sell.
Yeah.
I mean, how many worthless patterns are out there that people have, and it doesn't worth anything, not even not
I
pennies.
agree. Yep.
So I feel like you got to validate your product a little bit, but definitely I agree with you. Like you have to protect whatever that you're creating, whether it's a design or utility pattern, or once you have your company registered, start doing trademarks. And you're right, it's not that hard. The learning curve is there, and the mistake I see is a lot of people will hire an agency, or that's fine if it's not too expensive and they're a good agency, but I do most of my stuff myself because
Totally.
I always want to know like what does it take, the ins and outs. Now I'm not going to file the whole patent myself. I'm not that smart, but I have a patent attorney for that. But usually, like if it's an LLC, like I registered my LLC myself when I started, you know, and now we're in the transition of to something else. But uh, so you had an idea, right? That you will do this. You talk to the attorney and you start filing the patents for it. Tell me about the manufacturing side of things. What took you, like how long it took? What was the process like? Are you making stuff in the U.S.? The challenges behind that, and how long did it take to get to the market?
Yeah, for sure. So I will say though, back on the patent thing. So what you can do, and this is what I did, because you're completely right. Like my first patent was close to $80,000. So it's definitely a massive investment. So you definitely do not want, like, for anyone listening, you don't want to just go get a patent. You need market research. You have to validate your product. You have to make sure your product's good and it's not going to break. So I definitely went through all those steps for almost a year before I even got into trying to do the patent part of it. But what you can do is you can get a what's called a provisional patent on file. So
Mm-hmm.
what a provisional patent gives you is it gives you a full 12 months calendar year from the date of your filing to get all of your ducks in a row on what you're actually going to file. So I would suggest definitely doing that, because once you have product, your product's built, you have an actual sample, you've used it, it's going to work. You just don't know what the market's going to do. You can do that, because once you file your provisional patent, that's called your priority date. So what your priority date means is that your coverage starts from the exact date that you filed that patent. So whether it takes you 12 months to file your patent, and then you can actually start doing a continuation patent from there on out, if you want to add more things to your patent, it all goes back to your original filing date. So that's what I did. I did my provisional patents, and then I used that 12 months to test the market. So had I tested the market and found that, hey, no one wants this, I would have pulled the plug and been like, listen, I probably had $10,000 invested in the, provisional patent and the prior artworks, but that's a lot better than 80 to $100,000 of loss
Right, right.
actual patent. So that's definitely the route that I would go. And then as far as manufacturing goes, yeah, we build everything here in the U.S. All of our parts come from the U.S. All of our aluminum, our machine shops are here. Um, I got really lucky and found a machine shop in California that is able to build our mounts and package our mounts and give a finished product. A lot of machine shops out there don't do that. They just want to cut raw material and just ship you pallets of raw material, because it's so easy for them to do that, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it takes nothing for somebody to put a piece of metal in a machine and press a button that's already programmed, and then throw it on a pallet and ship it to you.
Yeah.
So definitely, if to start out, you definitely want to find a machine shop that's able to help you package the product, nicely, and put the label in the box for you and all that stuff. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, and it's worked out really good because the quality is so high, and I'm sure anyone that's ever held a C-swivel before, I mean, the quality of the machine work is
Yeah,
perfect.
I mean, I see those on almost every boat I've been on lately. I seen your bracket, especially like once you start getting larger and larger. Like I was on a 36-foot Sportsman fishing the other weekend, and they have sea swivel, and I mean, it was just so easy to just turn, and drop, and I mean, I come from the Minn Kota world, old days, where I mean, Minn Kota is a great product too, but like the regular brackets that we had to fab ourselves. So my story was, I took the boat to my installer, and he's like, "There's nothing in the market that will work because I
Mhm.
have a catamaran with
Yeah,
bow rails, and so I don't really need to swivel, but I have a walk around catamarans, but it needs a bracket that hangs out far enough, but also supports in the forward, not on the side." Because the first thing was like, "Yeah, let's do on the side," and I'm like, "Absolutely not. I'm not putting my trolling motor." And then the second thing he said is like, "What if we use the anchor? What's it
oh, the
called? The
pulpit. Yeah, the
oh
pulpit.
yeah, yeah." So he's like, "We can put it on top of the anchor, and the anchor can drop underneath it, and trolling motor drop over it." And I'm
Yeah,
like, "That doesn't look good at
doesn't look
all.
good.
Like
No.
it looks no." So we actually had to like uh, measure and scan one part of the boat, and then we took the design to a fabricator who had to cut and weld, and then we had to take that to a powder coating shop.
Yeah.
Then go back to the guy who was installing it, and then he had like a hard time running all the cables the way my boat was set up. So I mean, my boat was down for weeks on end, and a lot of money. We didn't know if the bracket was going to fit the first try or not, if we had to go back and cut and weld again. So Yeah, I mean, now I see your bracket. It's like so easy. It's literally out of the way. It's not blocking, like you said, any of the hatches and decks and seats and anchor. So in yeah, I think it really does serve a purpose. A lot of folks who don't have a trolling motor or even have a big boat, they don't always see. But once you own certain boats and do certain type of activities like fishing, you understand the value of the product. I always tell, even in my own company, right? We sell night vision cameras, right? So a lot of customers will tell us, Drew, I've been boating all my life without a camera. I'm fine, right? And we always tell them like, you're fine until you're not. So like if all it takes one time. If you hit something in the water at night, right, it will ruin your boat. It potentially can hurt somebody or you.
Yeah.
So is it really worth taking that risk? And so I think with your bracket, what I saw is like, you know if you fall and hurt yourself one time, break your leg or hand, pull that trolling motor, right, or fall in the water or whatever the case
Hmm.
is it really worth it? When you compare it like that, the cost of that bracket to me, it's very reasonable. Especially if your boat is 100,000, 200,000, $300,000. I think it's totally justifiable to spend, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Uh, but I was gonna say something. Yeah. So back to your thing, when you start manufacturing right here and you validated your ideas, you filed the patents. Uh, I still remember when trolling motors came out. A lot of people online said, I have my anchor. Why do I need a trolling motor?
Yeah.
You know how long it takes to throw an anchor? Done. I'm in
Yeah.
my spot, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of people rejected trolling motors themselves to begin with. And then over time, once people start using it, right? For me, it was a game changer when I saw how many spots I can hop while fishing around the same reef or the same area.
Oh, yeah.
And, my expensive anchors getting stuck, like in down, offshore, like 100, 200 feet of water. And then you lose, like my anchor and my chain, it's like $1,500, if not more.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if that thing gets stuck and if I lose, it's like, how to buy a new one. I don't want to like hurt my boat by driving the boat or potentially flipping it, because there's accidents like that too where people flip their boats because their anchors were stuck and they try to
Oh,
use
yeah.
the power to get unstuck.
Yeah. And what a lot of people don't realize too, like the even if you have a windlass, right, and you're like, oh, I can just press a button, and drop my anchor.
So if
Yeah,
we stop,
yeah, that's the case, but you can still get stuck. And not only that, especially on the West Coast, right? You have a very flat bottom. You're fishing very tiny little piles of rocks, very small spots. And when you're fishing the Gulf, if you're a couple hundred feet off of what you're trying to fish on, you're not going to catch fish.
yep,
So yes, you can throw an anchor, but honestly, how good are you that you can throw an anchor, drift perfectly back to the spot you want to fish at, and fall directly over top of that wreck and drop straight down on that wreck? I mean, I've only
yep,
seen a couple of, commercial guys and captains, and I've physically been on the boat with them before GPS guided towing motors were a thing. And I could see him mark the spot on his GPS. He would stop the boat and feel where the drift was going, and he could literally drive where he knows, drop the anchor, and fall right on that spot. But
right.
your typical boaters, there's just no way that's going to happen.
And
So,
then remember, currents change, wind change.
100%,
So
yeah,
it's not something you do it and then you can just sit on there. And here's a little secret from the fishing world that I know is like, when we go grouper fishing, once we get whatever the big groupers, when we drop down, after that it's all the small ones. So we learned that if we keep moving around from place to place, we tend to get more grouper, because I think, and this is fishing science, so don't quote me, but I think they're territorial. So the big ones will have certain areas,
for
and
sure.
then there's a bunch of small ones around them, and then you go to a next spot, and then there will be a big one there, right? So we learned that the trolling motor is game changer when it comes to fishing. We catch our limits so much faster than having to go drop an anchor and worry about it getting stuck. And in a way, you're destroying the reefs. When you drop an anchor, you're hurting a spot because you're disturbing the wildlife down there, right? uh, but no, like everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people didn't care about trolling motors, and look at it now. I mean, I don't even go offshore if I don't have a trolling motor. And then that turned into like these big sports fishing boats, right? Where like, well, it's too big. There's nowhere to put trolling motors. So they started putting two trolling motors, right? And then the company started making more bigger trolling motors that they can just, sell. And it's a perfect example for me in my business, because when people talk about our cameras, and sometimes they say, well, I don't need it. I never had to have it. But it's like any other technology. Like, we didn't have cars before. Why do you use cars? So that I always tell them about the trolling motor stories. Like, do you have a trolling motor? Like, so it's just like our camera is the same way. Like, once you use it and you see the value of it, it's really hard to go back without it.
Yeah,
Because
it really is. Especially with the wear and tear on your motors, right? Like, everyone knows your hours on your boat are a direct correlation to the value of your boat. And
Mhm.
just being from the boating background and running boat companies, I would get these boats that would come in, and they would trade the boat in and buy a new boat, and I'd pull the hours on the engines, and they have 1,400 hours, and 900 of them are at idle. And I would always ask the customer, like, what were you doing, just leaving your engines running the whole time? And they're like, well, we bottom fish, so we have to, it's at idle, we're bumping in and out of gear, and the engines are just running the whole time. So I think the biggest plus to a trolling motor is you can go to your fishing spot, put your trolling motor in the water, and just turn your motors off, because
Right.
there's no reason to have your engines running out there. I mean, I know these people are like, oh, I don't turn my motors off once I leave the dock. Dude, it's not 1998 anymore
What
with
if
the
it
two.
doesn't start back up, Mark? What if it doesn't? What if I'm offshore and I only have one engine, and I
I tell the
don't trust
people,
my
I
engine? Okay, it's 30
yeah,
years old and it
yeah.
might not start, man.
I tell everybody when they tell me that, I'm like, yeah, man, if you have an old carbureted two stroke, I completely understand. Those things were kind of finicky sometimes. They wouldn't crank back up. But, saying, what if my 2027 brand new outboard doesn't start up when I get out there? That's like going to the gas station in your brand new car and not turning your car off to go grab a soda from 7-Eleven.
Hey,
It's just
Mark,
crazy to think
I'm
that.
gonna say, speak for yourself, man. My four stroke, I mean, it never let me down. Okay, it was reliable. It was simple. It was easy to work on. Yes, it was polluting the whole ocean, and I had to mix oil every time and whatnot. But no, I know what you mean. I mean, yeah, I think, do we even see two strokes left anymore? I know, like they.
Yeah, I see a bunch down here. As far as power to weight goes, I mean, the two stroke is king. So
Right.
like a lot of the older flats boats and stuff that have horsepower ratings, or they just can't handle the weight of a four stroke, I still see them putting two strokes on there. And believe it or not, Yamaha still makes their 90 horsepower three cylinder two stroke, which is probably one of the best outboards ever built. That 90 horsepower three cylinder is the
So
most power to weight. It's bulletproof, and
or
that
even
motor is still
even
built.
the OX66, right? That was one
Yeah,
of the bulletproof ones, because I
it's
had
a
a
great
couple
motor.
myself. And yes, I also have one. I have one blow on me, and then I had to replace it. But OX66. I mean, but then look at the newer engines. I mean, I have seen issues with newer engines. I won't say the brand names here, but there's plenty of times, a big boat goes out, a Freeman goes out, and it comes back on whatever two or three engines instead of four,
Oh yeah,
or so. Uh,
I'm not
there's
going
always
to tell
been
you
bulletproof,
what
right?
outboards they were, but I've gone out on a quad engine boat and I've come back on one engine.
Yep, yep. I done that too. It's like silly things like starter issues, or like the paint flaking off the outboards, or like if you're in the industry, you know which brand I'm talking about probably. But anyway, so let's go back to your manufacturing. You found the shop and you have a really good relationship with them. A lot of folks don't do that. They go straight overseas, and have them manufactured in, China, Vietnam, India. I'm from India myself, so I'm very familiar with that whole process. Uh, why did you pick a US vendor, and how do you compete with other companies who might produce these products in overseas? How does that work?
Yeah, so I knew off the bat, not only is this product, a high quality product, and I'm not saying getting things from overseas, you can't get high quality products, but at the end of the day, if I ordered a bunch of raw material from overseas and I had somebody build it overseas and machine it, and I get a finished product shipped for me, I don't know what that aluminum is. It's already anodized. Whether it's a anodized piece of aluminum from overseas or here in the US, they look exactly the same, but you don't know the quality of what you're getting from that plant that you ordered it from, and honestly, you never will. And there's been horror stories of people getting, these great samples, and the samples exceed all their testing. And then once you give them a huge blanket order, you're like, all right, I'm gonna take 10,000 units. Then they give you the crap. So, and I didn't want to ever deal with that, and I never wanted to even go down that road, because at the end of the day, my bracket's holding up a $7,000 trolling motor. So if something fails on my bracket, $7,000 is going to go overboard in the water. So that's the reason I chose to do all my machining here in the US, and all my aluminum is bought here. So I can actually trace my batch numbers to every sea swivel that I make. I can get the MSDS sheets from that raw sheet of aluminum that came from the foundry. So that's why I choose to do that. And that's also why my brackets, it's definitely not cheap. I mean, it's a premium product, but I have to do that because I I choose to build it here in the US. I choose to have the quality control that we have, with the materials, from the raw materials to the finished product.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt. I mean, I can easily go overseas and build it for half the cost, but I'll never do that.
Right. No, and I'm so happy to see that we still have founders, who do things like the way you're doing. Uh, I want to be like you, but unfortunately, in my case, there are certain parts we just don't have them in the U.S. Like
Yeah,
it
100%.
is impossible to get the part in the U.S. Even if I found a factory, let's say they can manufacture that one little plastic piece for me, it will cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars to a point where my product will pretty much can't compete with what's in the market.
100%. Yeah.
So we kind of do a mix approach. So we have global components, a bunch of different countries, but then we do all the prototyping, R&D, assembly, packaging, shipping, software, all that. It's in house here in Florida. But then if we need a little HDMI connector for something, I'm not going to manufacture that here because
Makes sense.
A, I need licenses from HDMI, which I don't want to go through all that paperwork, and then B, it's a 20 cents part that I can get overseas, which will cost me $500,000 to start. So it's like that's the fight I don't want to quite take on yet. Maybe in the future, as if we see more and more, ecosystem for manufacturing, then yes, I definitely want to bring some of the stuff back here. I mean, the tariffs and all that really opened the eyes for a lot of us on the supply chain. Even COVID, I would say, kind of showed you what can happen when one thing breaks, everything else breaks behind it, and what a nightmare it becomes. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's good that you're doing it with a vendor here. Uh, the grade of your aluminum so it doesn't corrode. I mean, I understand what it takes to make a product in the salt water environment. I mean, it is brutal, man. I mean, salt water is brutal. I mean, it is so hard to create something that will be waterproof. It won't corrode. It can take the sun. Uh, a lot of I have a whole new respect for some of the companies in the marine space for what they do, because before I started this company, I'm like, how hard can it be? Slap a little motor here,
Yeah.
get a mold for a plastic piece, put it together, and you're good to go. And then when I started doing this, I'm like, holy crap, like you're looking at tolerances of like, zero point 0.3, zero point 0.2 millimeters. And then you're doing salt spray testing for like 1,000+ hours to make sure that it's not going to corrode. And then there's a UV testing, right? Like I didn't know any of this. I don't have a background in manufacturing, and I don't think you do either, right? So tell us a little bit about the process you took to make sure your brackets, the quality of the bracket. It is, so what are the tests you guys do to make it that high of a quality? I'm losing my words.
Yeah. No. So yeah. So I was lucky enough to I already came out of the marine space, so I already knew, just being a boat manufacturer, right? Like we had to manufacture things that last in saltwater. We were building the vessel that everything gets attached to. So the first thing I did was do salt test chamber test. We did one that's I can't remember the acronym for it, but it's like a highly accelerated salt test,
Yep.
and it can simulate 20 years in the marine industry, like just regular use within like a 1 month period.
Hmm.
So we did that test, which it's incredibly corrosive and it kind of overkill, to be honest with you, just for a bracket. So we did that test, and then we did your standard ISO salt test chamber testing. So between those two tests, we kind of figured out what coatings we have to put on the aluminum, what to do, what not to do. I went as far as even putting different gels and products on the heads of the bolts where the stainless touches the aluminum to see what reacts and what doesn't. And then you can kind of create your manual around that. So when you do your install manual, you can put in your manual like, this is what we suggest, how to install it. This is what you need to put, for the screw heads, how to do the install. So that's always the most important thing, is doing your stress testing on your product. Whether it's going to be a structural product like what we do, or it's just a housing for your camera. So that you always have to do your testing. I can't you know say this enough. Never go to the market with something that you just came up with that you didn't test. I mean, you
You learned
have
the hard way.
you
The
have
the marine customer, I mean, the customers that we have, they're awesome people. They're very genuine, very easy to work with. But if you cut corners and if you scam them, they're brutal. Your name will be
industry is
ruined
very,
within
very
days.
small.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
be on Facebook tomorrow, and in whatever chance you have left to to do successful thing at company, it will affect for years. If you mess up once, it's not forgiving. Because, and I understand, if somebody's spending $1,000+ on a product, it has to work. So definitely no cutting corners and selling junk. I mean, something I'm very much into the stress testing. Like, we driven our trucks on our camera, and people are like, why you gotta run a truck on your camera? My camera sits on a boat. I'm never gonna run truck on it. And then we were like, well, there is parts of the world where they have hail, right? So when the hail happens, we don't want it to damage our cameras. But our camera is so strong, we wanted to show off that we can literally drive a semi truck on it if you want it, and it won't break. It's 316 stainless housing. It's not plastic, so it that's what gives you that 20-year lifespan, because the stainless is not going to have like a UV fade, or it's 316L, it's not 304, so it's not gonna corrode like 304 would. I mean, on top of that, we powder coat on top of that. There's a primer under that powder coat. So like, even the places where no one is looking or even care, we always make sure that we do the right thing, because that's what sets you for a 100-year company and not a 2-year company, right? Because I mean, look at some of the boats, like Grady White, for example, right? They have that reputation of building a really strong boat with foam field. I know there's issues with filling with foam, waterlogging, but the reality is, I think they did a great job at branding their brand to a point where even all these years later, people still believe in them. And that's, as a founder, that's my goal, to make a product that is so good that it's like an instant answer to their friends or whoever's asking, or they see it, that this is what I recommend, because it's made in the U.S. or built in the U.S., however you want to say it, and it's been tested. It's not some cheap crap from overseas that's gonna fall apart. You know, so tell me about you mentioned the bolt, right? That so you have the bolt that holds the bracket that it swivels on. Is Can you talk about that, or is that a secret sauce of your product? Because to
No,
me,
it's
it blows my mind how much weight that thing like holds, right? And how easily you can turn this big old trolling motor around, and how easily you can drop it. How does that work? Tell me about that.
So it was pretty funny. So like when I was trying to come up with these designs early on, I had 30 different ways to swivel it. And every time I went to go test something, with multiple bolts, or putting like a boss kind of in the middle of it with multiple bolts around it, every time we did that, the leverage that you're pulling on that is so insane. So on a, like, let's just use a 100-inch trolling motor, for example. A 100-inch trolling motor with 100 foot-pounds of thrust is exerting about 1,200 pounds of upward force to the plate at the end of the plate. So now you have to take that 1,200 pounds of force, and then now you have this cantilever that's 18 inches long. So the amount of force that's being applied to the middle of that plate is astronomically high compared to what you're doing. So every time I came up with these ideas. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we failed so many brackets. We broke so many designs, broke bolts off of it, sheared pins off of it. I mean, there was a time early on where the whole top plate broke off, and the trolling motor was swinging around on the cord in the water, and we had to unplug the cord from the boat. So we went through all this testing to see what works and what doesn't work. And I kept going back to, I'm like, man, I'm like, the only thing that permanently works is a through bolting, right? Like, so I looked at outboards. Like, not a lot of people realize this. Your outboard, not only does it weigh 800 pounds, but it's got 300, 400 horsepower, and it's pushing against the boat, and just it's getting the crap beat out of it back there. And the only way to do that is to through bolt it into the hull. So that's how I came up with this idea. I'm like, man, I'm like, you need just one massive through bolt. You need one just load bearing bolt. And if you held the bolt that we manufacture, so like that main bolt that we build, we actually turn it on a lathe from a solid rod of 316L stainless steel. And then we heat treat it, and then we passivate it. So it'll never rust, and it's incredibly hard. But the shear strength of that bolt is like, 70,000 PSI. It's some astronomically high number. So that's why I overkilled that joint, and then that's why it's so smooth, because you're not fighting anything to get the unit to spin. It's got one centralized bolt on it. And then another thing too is you cannot turn aluminum on any other kind of metal, because what happens is you're actually wearing the aluminum out, so you'll get like this black bleeding, like
So it'll galvanize, right? There's a galvanic corrosion because there's dissimilar metals
well,
touching each other.
you have that, but you also have where, like, I don't know if you've ever been on a boat that has a stainless steel screw and an aluminum T-top, and you see like black, like kind of water bleeding from it. That's
Mm-hmm.
stainless actually rubbing on the aluminum, and you're kind of almost polishing the aluminum, and it creates that black soot that comes off of it. So I didn't want that to happen, because if I had made that bolt stationary, that would have happened, and it would have been a nightmare. So I wanted the bolt to turn with the top plate, and the only way I was able to do that is to put a stainless steel ball bearing on the bottom of it. So that's why everything works so smooth and it's so strong, is because you can turn the top plate and everything internally spins with it. You just don't notice it as the end user. Like, you're not thinking about that when you're just putting your trolling motor in the water. But these are all the things that we thought about, and we did stress testing on it. And my goal was to always hit a safety factor of 2. Like, that was the minimum. So that's another thing that you have to realize when you're starting a company, whether it's a camera, whether it's a mount, or whatever you're doing, whatever application that you're doing, you want to at least double it. And that's what's called a factor of safety. So our goal was 2, but we actually hit almost 3. So every C swivel it's like 2.97 is our safety factor. So that means that whatever the bracket is rated for, you can almost 3x that before it fails. And the reason I chose the material I did is because 7075 T6 aluminum is what they make like airplane fuselages out of. That's what they make airplane wings out of. This stuff, even when it yields, it doesn't snap, it bends. So when we were yielding the top plate of the C swivel, we hit like 3,400 psi before it bent the top plate up. And your regular 6061 aluminum or 5 series aluminum, all those aluminums will actually snap and break. And I did not want that to happen. I wanted the like if God forbid if something happened to where your trolling motor went in the water and it deployed while you're running at 50 miles an hour, I didn't want this bracket to just snap off and rip the whole thing out of the boat. I wanted to move and I wanted to flex and I wanted to yield to save the boat, right? Like, what's worse, your trolling motor mount bending or your trolling motor mount snapping off and ripping the
Right.
whole boat with it? So
Right. Well,
I
what's
wanted to
worse
make
is controlling motor catching on fire, but that's a different story.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's kind of, we did so much research, so much market research and, testing different materials. We made stainless plates, we made 6 series aluminum plates, we tried to make carbon fiber plates and none of it worked. And another thing too was people don't realize is you have to do cycle testing. So what cycle testing is like, hey, like your bracket may, yeah, it took 3,200 psi to bend it, but how many times can it do that before it fails? So
Right.
that's called cycle testing. So we actually we spent a lot of money in FEA testing, and that's a really really expensive computer
Mhm.
program that takes all your materials. You put it in the program. You can actually mount it to a fiberglass material in the computer, and it literally will test up and down, up and down, up and down.
Right.
And it takes the actual computer program 2 to 3 weeks to run all this data and our bracket hit over 1 million cycles and it maxed the program out. So that was the coolest thing that we saw is like, I always wondered like how long can I tell a customer like, hey, this is going to be a product you can use for X amount of years before it starts to fatigue, or is this a lifetime product? So that's why we back it with the lifetime warranty. That piece of metal can literally go through a lifetime of use of abuse
Right.
and not break.
I mean, it's a metal at the end of the day, right? It's not like plastic where it's gonna fade, it's gonna like wore down over time. The sun will break it apart, and then it gets
Correct.
brittle, and then it
Yeah.
starts cracking, and then eventually it will break, right? The metals, I mean, that's the exact reason why we chose metal housings and not plastic. At least so far, is I wanted a product that will last a very long time on a boat and create that reputation for the brand, and whatnot. So uh, you know, just to recap, you had an idea, you had an MVP, minimal viable product, you tested it, you filed that, you finished filing your patents, you tested the product really hard, then you launched the product in the market, and you've been selling it for almost 3 years now. Tell us, some of the challenges, how big you guys are, what does your distribution model look like, and if somebody's interested, how they can learn more or where to get it, and anything related to that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I knew right off the bat, this product was going to be mostly on the OEM level or the distribution level, right? Because, your typical boater is not going to be able to buy a trolling motor, buy a bracket, buy lithium batteries, run the cables in their boat. I mean, it's not an easy job to install a trolling motor on a 30-foot plus boat. I mean, you need some kind of mechanical knowledge to do that. So I knew off the bat that I had to go into distribution first and OEM first before I even hit the retail market. Obviously, I put up my website and I got some retail orders here and there just from people that are DIYers, but that's something that you have to know going into it too. And whatever product that you're building, you have to know who your customer is. So I believe our customer, our we probably do 70% OEM and distribution, 30% retail. So a mass amount of our sales goes through that channel. So that's something that you just kind of have to know your market, know your people, and know what you're selling before you decide where to go. And maybe it's not what you think isn't right, and that's something too, right? Like I'm sure like when you start a company and you're running it, as things come at you, you have to be able to pivot and shift and just be able to change as things go on.
Right.
Um,
Always.
yeah,
Both of us start sort of from the garage. I mean, I
literally.
lost my garage. I started in the garage, and the hurricane took my garage away too. So I didn't even have a house. I lost my inventory, and that kind of forced me to get a small warehouse. And once I got that small warehouse, things got serious, and then I'm sleeping at the warehouse. I still sleep some nights here in my. So none of this is, I would say, easy, but it's not impossible. So if you're, you know, any part of your life, you could be in your 20s, 30s, 50s. It's never too late to start a product. You probably fail the first few times. Failure is okay. I mean, the amount of failures that we have, people don't see that, right? I talk to customers, and they only see the good parts of the business or the products, but they don't see the 2 in the morning when you're trying to write a code because something's not working, and then your laptop crashes or whatever the case is. And so I used to go out on a little boat every single day for like months, like 6 months. We did testing before we could get the. So you have to be really persistent about whatever you're doing and not give up that idea, but also don't overcomplicate it. In the beginning, just get from A to B, and that's why I recommend get an idea, get it made, and sell it. And once you sell it, you'll get a lot of feedback, and keep that feedback loop open with your customers. So we mainly do B2C. We do have a great dealer network, and we have distributors and whatnot that we're going to work with. But the reality is, I still talk to my customers every day. I still answer the phone. I still want to know what their pain points are, and that's what gives you that leading edge that your competition might not have, because they're not, if you can just listen to your customer, they will tell you what you should be making. Don't focus too much on what you want. Focus on what they want, because ultimately they're the one who's paying for your product,
100%.
not you. Because me being an engineer, I'm always like, let's do this feature, let's do that feature. I want to try that, do this, and the customer is like, Dhru, I just want to see it in the dark. I just want to make sure I don't hit something. Yeah, I want to protect my kids, my wife, my boat. I just want to make sure I get home safe after dinner. And that's it. And I'm like, note taken. So we'll focus on the main core thing and not worry about all these little other problems. So yeah, I just want to wrap it up here. Almost 48 minutes here. Is there anything else you want to add to this conversation? I know it's very high level. We can talk for hours and go deeper into this. So that's maybe another time, right? We can pick a topic and dive down. If anybody watching here have questions, need help, you can reach out to me. I'm always trying to help other folks who are starting businesses or they have a business.
So 100%.
Because I had mentors that helped me a lot, and if it wasn't for them, I don't know, man, I would be still working my old job, right? So I always try to get that good karma back in the community. So if you have anything, just reach out to me or Mark. And it's always great. We're both in Florida. We're both in Sarasota, Florida. Especially if you're in near us, come say hi, and more than happy to. Even if you have a big business, right? So I have a lot of other friends that already have businesses in marine space. So we hang out and we talk what's working and what's not working, and kind of bounce ideas off. Because sometimes if the sales are dipping, is it me or is it the market, right? And it's always nice to know friends that I can ask and say, hey, how are you doing? And they're like, yeah, like it's not that great this month. The winter's coming and whatnot. So, thanks for being here. Love your brackets, man. I really hope, that we both grow, you grow, and I see you again at the boat shows. And are you going to have a big booth at the boat shows now that you are,
So it's so funny. Like everyone always asks me, like, why don't I have a huge booth at the boat show? I'm like, honestly, it's for me to stay in that booth and just to say hi to people. I would rather walk around the boat show and go to all the boat manufacturers that use my bracket and go talk to them, talk to the owners of the boat companies. I couldn't tell you how many times I've walked around the boat show and I've been at CV or Sea Hunter, and I just happen to be in the booth, and I see these customers that are walking on the boat, and it has my bracket on there, and they see my shirt like, oh, do you have one? I'm like, well, I'm Mark, I'm the owner of the company. And then we talk for an hour, and so I like doing that more than having a booth there. Um, we go to IBEX and we go to ICAST, but like the actual boat shows, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, I would rather walk around and
Right.
see the boat manufacturers, talk to new boat manufacturers. And when you have a booth, not only is it incredibly expensive to set one of those up, but just for me, for my time to sit in that booth for 4 days straight, just I don't find the value in it for me. Every company is different, so
Right.
don't take
Well,
what I'm telling you.
it's because you're B2C. Sorry, B2. Like you're selling into business B2B. For us, we are more on B2C. So we have customers buying directly from us. So like when I put that camera on the table and they're walking by and they see it, they're like, oh, okay, let me investigate. And so for us, it helps. But also like I'll have somebody run the booth, and then I'll do what you did. I'll put a boat I heard and I'll go walk around and talk and meet. We will be at IBEX, so hopefully I'll see you there. Uh, I'll come say hi and yeah, I think IBEX. That's my first IBEX, by the way. So I don't know
It's a great show.
what to
Um,
expect, but I'm
yeah.
excited.
As far as a manufacturer goes, and for anyone that's in the marine space or has any product that they sell, the cool thing about IBEX is it's a trade show, so it's not open to the public. It's not a normal boat show. So all these boat manufacturers from around the world and around the U.S. send their engineers to go to IBEX, and they're basically shopping for the boat company, right? Like they're there to see what new products are out there, what's going on in the marine industry. So for anyone that has any kind of boating product, for you not to be in IBEX is crazy. At least for the first couple years, until your name is known. Thankfully, we have our bracket in someone else's booth at IBEX, so like we don't have to physically go there and do the show anymore. But for the first 2 years, I was doing all the shows myself. I went to every boat show myself. So now I still go to the shows, but I enjoy walking around and talking to customers, talking to the boat manufacturers, and
Right.
it's just really cool, to walk through the boat show and see, 150 of your brackets at the Miami Boat Show on everyone's boat. It's a really
Yep.
cool feeling.
Yeah. It's really rewarding. So for how much hard work it takes, let's say something does work out and you are somewhat successful, I think it's extremely rewarding seeing your products in the field. I mean, for us, we're potentially saving lives on the water. So when we get a call from like a customer that says, you know what, your camera saved me last night because there was this piling in the water that I would have not seen it. I was doing 30 miles per hour and your
Yeah.
camera showed me and I was able to dodge it like last minute and like I get goosebumps even talking about it. Like that what motivates me, to get up every morning and work till 3 in the morning and sleep 4 hours and it's like I feel like 30s is like grind, right? So I'm just going to grind my entire 30s and then see what's next in my 40s. So if you're somebody who's starting, again, doesn't have to be in your 20s or 30s, but get started and don't be afraid of all these big things because both me and Mark started from nothing. We don't have investor money. We don't have
No
uh,
cap.
I don't have any rich parents. I don't know about you, but
No.
so it was all cash flow. It was all self done. We don't even have any debt. I didn't take any loans, so it's completely cash flow. You can do it. The American dream is still there. I mean, this coming from somebody who grew up in India, and I moved here in high school, like freshman year. So I always wanted that American dream, and it was sad to see everybody tell me that doesn't exist. And I'm like, maybe not for you, but I'm going to
It's
get mine.
there. It's definitely there. You just got to work for it. No
It's
one's going to knock
definitely
on your
there.
door and hand it to you. You have to go out there and get it. And we when we first started, like probably 6 months into it, I actually received a handwritten letter from a customer, and it basically said like he was in his late 70s and it was getting hard for him to boat, and previously he had his trolling motor mounted up on the bow of the boat, and he slipped and fell on the deck, and thankfully he didn't go overboard, but he was fishing by himself, and he had stopped fishing for like 2 years because he was so scared for that to happen again and him fall overboard, and there's no one around him to save him. So he installed my bracket on his boat, and he wrote me a letter. He's like, now he's like, I feel comfortable fishing by myself now. because of your bracket. So, kind of like how you're getting, those calls about, hey, your camera saved my, you know, my family, from danger. It's really cool getting, the feedback from the customers about, how the bracket, in terms of safety is really affecting their, daily life and how, how they can fish now.
Right.
So it's
You're making a
very
change,
rewarding.
right? You're making a change in this world, and for me personally, as long as I'm making a positive change in this world, that's all it matters. Like, yeah, money is good, and yeah, we have to make money to pay employees and all the marketing spend, all the testing that you talk for, thousands of hours. None of that is cheap, but so you do have to run a business. But ultimately, for me personally, it's that feeling that I helped somebody achieve their goals, right? So like we do have a lot of customer, like you said, they're getting a little bit on the older side, and they'll say like, hey Dhru, if I get stuck in a crab trap at night going to a restaurant, I'm not fit enough to hop in the water at night, cut the lines or unstuck that crab trap out of the props, right? So I'd rather just spend the $1,500 on your camera and not hit those crab traps, because so because I'm just not physically fit anymore. So but they love going out at night and grabbing food with their families and maybe watch a game at some waterfront restaurant. So it's to like help them achieve that dream or like whatever goal that they have. I think that's the most rewarding thing about like my business or your business. So like if somebody's thinking about starting a product or you already have a product, always think of what is it that is helping the customer, and if it's meaningful, if it's making a difference in their life, it will automatically grow in sales. If the product is great, you don't have to do anything else. And
Correct.
that's sort of my philosophy behind it. But let's wrap up this call. Almost an hour. Unless you have anything else to add.
No, just like you said earlier, if anyone has any questions, trying to start a business, like I said, you had your mentors. I definitely had one mentor that, pushed me to start this company and take the leap. And I'm so glad he pushed me to do that, because if not, I mean, it wouldn't be a thing. So
Right.
um, I'm grateful. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them
Right.
for
Yeah, both me and Mark are starting businesses the new way. We are not your traditional founders.
you. No,
I'm not saying anything wrong with those founders. It's just the world is changing so fast with AI, and like I'm on the tech side, so I use so many AI tools, and so many things we do is different than most other companies in the space. So we're always open to listen and try new things and whatnot. So anyway, thanks for being here. I'll see you at IBEX if you're gonna be there.
for sure.
Otherwise, talk to you later.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.